An historic agreement to protect the world's oceans has been approved after 10 years of talks. The High Seas Treaty aims to safeguard marine life in 30% of areas that don't belong to any single country. Only about 1% of these areas are currently protected. The deal is being hailed as a massive step by climate activists, as our climate reporter Esme Stallard reports.
The ship has reached the shore.
It took all night, but countries from around the world finally agreed on how to protect the high seas.
We will formally adopt the text in all 6 official languages of the United Nations.
High seas are international waters that aren't controlled by any nation. They make up 2/3 of the world's oceans and play host to most of our planet's marine life, some 2 million species. Until now, all countries had a right to fish, ship and research in these areas, but it's left the animals and plants living there vulnerable. Around 10% of monitored species are at risk of extinction.
I think that this treaty that will lay the groundwork for creating 30% of the ocean into marine sanctuaries that cannot be fished in is so important. We have to save these creatures.
Talks were deadlocked for years, mostly over how genetic material from plants and animals found in the high seas should be shared between nations. Several important drugs, including treatments for COVID, HIV and cancer, were developed from marine life. The potential for profit is huge. But no one knows how much ocean resources are truly worth, nor how they could be split.
It's a little bit hard to even wrap our heads around how big and how distant these areas are. So if you imagine like a big high definition widescreen TV, and if only like 3 or 4 of the pixels on that giant screen are working, that's kind of our knowledge of the deep ocean. Like we don't know so much of what's going on.
Countries will need to meet again to formally adopt the treaty. But for many, now there will be much relief. Esme Stallard, BBC News.
Well, let's get some more analysis on this. We're joined now by the head of Clean Transitions at Greenpeace Australia Pacific. That's Jess Panegyris. Thank you very much for talking to us. Some really good news. This is actually being called a historic win. Tell us why.
This is a major victory today, and we're all celebrating. This now gives the world the pathway towards protecting 30% of the high seas, which is critically important for protecting the incredible biodiversity that resides in the world's oceans. And this has been at least 15 years in the making. There's been many false starts. There's been so much effort put in from around the world. So we're not 100% there yet. There's still more work to be done, but this is a historic day.
And one of the things that this treaty is looking to do is put some law in the lawless areas of the high seas, the bits that nobody owns. But the critical question then is about implementation. What are the plans for how these laws will be enforced?
So now we need every country to ratify the treaty and agree to implement. And that work needs to happen as quickly as possible because we don't have time to wait. And so we are really calling on countries around the world that have agreed on this text to now get on with the job of protecting our oceans as quickly as possible.
You just said there, we don't have time to wait, suggesting that protecting these seas is critically important. Just explain a little bit why that is. What's at risk if this treaty doesn't go as planned?
Well, we are already seeing huge threats to our marine biodiversity, skyrocketing rates of animals being on the critically endangered list. That has flow-on effects right up and down the food chain. Our oceans are also critical for our resilience with a warming climate. And one of the things that these sanctuaries will do is provide some resilience, if you like, as the oceans warm. And the work here is not done. If we have 30% of the high seas in marine sanctuaries, that's a wonderful start. It protects those threatened species from overfishing, from ship strikes. There is more work to be done. We also need to protect them from climate change. We need to protect them from offshore oil and gas drilling, but we now have a pathway towards those marine sanctuaries, and that's just wonderful news.
It certainly is to have that pathway. As you say, a healthy ocean is critical for just our lives on this planet. But with time being so critical, how long is this process expected to take?
Well, processes of negotiating and implementing and ratifying agreements like this can spin out for a long time. This has been 15 years at least in the making. So we are asking for everyone to act as quickly as they can, ratify this domestically, move on with the implementation, because that's now the critical work. We need to take the steps that are essential to actually implementing those marine sanctuaries as soon as possible.
And certainly the hope is that it won't take another 15 years, but still a fantastic and monumental win today. Thank you very much for joining us, and good to get your thoughts. Jess Panagir is Head of Clean Transitions at Greenpeace Australia Pacific.